welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Mardiege, live today on June the 14th to close out the week with some pretty big news that we received last night and also into today that I wanted to talk about on today's show. Starting off with none bigger, obviously, I mentioned it yesterday as the news broke on my show that Trevor Lawrence agreed to a 5-year, $275 million deal. We're going to get into all the details on that and what it could mean for the other quarterbacks. Then we're going to talk about what Tom Brady mentioned before he got inducted into the Hall of Fame for the New England Patriots. He made some pretty interesting comments on the new wave of quarterbacks, and I wanted to give my thoughts on it and just dive deeper into that. And also, we're going to talk about the Las Vegas Raiders and obviously a lot of talk about their new offense, getting Brock Bowers and trying to complete that offense, but I'm looking elsewhere as the most vital piece to that puzzle for the Raiders to be competitive in 2024. All that and much more coming up on today's show. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. And also, if you have any comments or you want to have any questions towards me on any topics, please use the tip and donations link that you see on your screen, GSMCPodcast.net. By using that, I'm able to see your question or comment and get your guys' thoughts or perspective on anything I say. I'll read it on air as well, and that way it'll just continue on with the conversation. It's a massive help for this show and the network as well. So please, if you guys would, use the tip and donations link, GSMCPodcast.net. And in saying that, we could start off with the first topic we have on hand. The biggest news probably that just dropped last night around this time, funny enough, was that Trevor Lawrence got that massive extension. He was part of that group that was looking for a new contract. Him, Tua, Jordan Love, and Dak Prescott were the main candidates to be next in line to get their next payday. But Ian Rappaport broke the news last night, or last evening I should say, and the details of this new contract: 5 years, $275 million for Trevor Lawrence, $55 million per year, tying him with Joe Burrow for the highest earning quarterbacks currently in the NFL. And also, this new contract for Trevor Lawrence guarantees him $200 million. On top of that, he has another $142 million guaranteed at signing, plus $37.5 million as a signing bonus as well. Basically, a lot of money going to Trevor Lawrence, a very, very rich contract for the Jacksonville Jaguars starting quarterback. Like I mentioned, he equals Joe Burrow for the highest earning quarterback and also tied for second with the total value of his contract at $275. The first is still Patrick Mahomes with his total value of his 10-year contract being $450 million. Now, it resets the order a little bit for the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL on a per-year salary basis. You got Burrow and Trevor Lawrence making the same at $55 million. Then you had Jared Goff after his new contract extension at $53. Herbert just behind him at $52.5 million. Then Lamar Jackson at $52. Then Jalen Hurts at $51 million. These are the only quarterbacks in the NFL making at least $50 million per year or more. And Trevor Lawrence, with this pretty historic deal, becomes the 4th quarterback to make $200 million fully guaranteed in a contract, going along with Deshaun Watson, Joe Burrow, and Justin Herbert as well. With Trevor Lawrence, now we can get into the biggest talking points, I would say, because there's a lot to unpack with Trevor Lawrence. One, he had probably the longest remaining time on his contract for the Jaguars to sort of have these negotiations go on. He was going into the last year of his rookie deal, and the Jaguars already picked up his 5th-year option, so he had this remainder of this offseason, plus the following one, because in 2025, he was supposed to play on that 5th-year option that the Jaguars already picked up. It was going to guarantee him $25.7 million if no extension was reached, so obviously that is out the window now. But regardless of that, you had Tua on the last year. He was on his 5th-year option year of his contract. Then you had Dak on the final year of his extension that he received a while back. And Jordan Love also on the final year of his initial contract. Not his fifth-year option, but it's still his rookie contract, I guess you would still call it. So all those other teams were still running down to the, trying to beat the clock there towards the end of this offseason, trying to get a deal done to get this out of the way and just focus on football. And Trevor Lawrence had the most time remaining, so it came at a big surprise to me that he was the next one to get paid. And on top of that, a lot of people will jump right away to the recent performances because, in all honesty, Trevor Lawrence, for being a first overall, quarterback selection and a lot of hype coming in through Clemson during his time at Clemson and heading into the NFL. Of course, you throw out that first year with Urban Meyer, but then since then, I feel like I've been left wanting more, wanting to see more out of Trevor Lawrence because as a first overall pick, generational type of quarterback, one of the most hyped up quarterbacks, I think, at least in my time, of following football and college football a little bit. He was definitely up there, and I don't know, I don't think people just mention him in the same breath as Patrick or Joe or Justin even or Lamar Jackson as well. I think those guys are just a level or maybe even two above Trevor Lawrence based on some of the stats that I have pulled up here. In some of the most important stats, if you look around the NFL, and I actually have it pulled up here in just a second. If you actually look around the NFL and how Trevor Lawrence sort of finished this last year, you look at some of those numbers you see on your screen, he finished no higher in any statistical category than ninth, including completion percentage, yards, touchdowns, and QBR. He actually finished about middle of the pack, as you see, in touchdowns with 21, and even lower than that in QBR with a 56.1, and had yards at around 10. Finished around 10th in yards at just over 4,000. And, okay, you can see those numbers. You could think it's only 1 year. It's not too big a deal if he had one bad year, but you add that to the Urban Meyer year, so now you have two, and then you're left with one really good one where he led that playoff comeback against the Los Angeles Chargers, and that really gave a lot of people in Jacksonville hope, a lot of optimism that this guy really is built like that. This guy could be the guy to carry us into this next stage. He could be our franchise guy for the next decade, but then it follows up with a very poor year, and now you're really left at a weird situation with Trevor Lawrence where you've seen one good year, you don't want to acknowledge the first year because he's a rookie and he had a very bad coaching situation. Now you're really only left with this one, and you don't really know where to go. And I think with all the uncertainty, my overall last verdict on this is that the Jaguars sort of jumped the gun a little bit, because if you dig deeper into this conversation, there is, like I mentioned, the good with Trevor Lawrence. He's fifth currently in QB wins in Jaguars history at 20, fourth in franchise history in passing yards and passing touchdowns, and he led, like I mentioned, that great comeback in the playoffs against the Los Angeles Chargers. Then you get to the negative stuff, and apart from these numbers that you see on your screen, there's also the fact that he led the NFL with 21 total giveaways, and he's 0-5. He finished 0-5 in his last 5 starts to miss the playoffs in 2023. Then he finished with 20-plus giveaways in 2 of his first 3 seasons, and he has the most fumbles lost than any other player in the last 3 seasons as well. So not looking great in terms of, just comparing yourself to these other quarterbacks, these other categories statistically for Trevor Lawrence. But then also, I saw this on scrolling through social media, and I had to take a screenshot of it because to compare him even more to another quarterback that's definitely not making the same amount of money that Trevor Lawrence is, Daniel Jones compared to Trevor Lawrence through his first 50 career starts, the record 20-30 for Trevor Lawrence and 19-30-1 for Daniel Jones. A quarterback rating of 85 for Trevor Lawrence, a quarterback rating of 86 for Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones has just about the same passing touchdowns, 57-58. Trevor Lawrence has more interceptions through his first 50 career starts than Daniel Jones, and they also have the same completion percentage, the same yards per attempt, and total yards basically the same, just above 12,000 passing yards in their first 50 career starts. Very similar to a guy that doesn't have the best narrative painted around him in Daniel Jones. So that's one guy. But what does this mean for the other quarterbacks in the other conversation? Like we mentioned, Tua, Dak, and Jordan Love all made the playoffs last year, and Trevor Lawrence did not. You look at how they finished last year as well. Dak number one in completion percentage and touchdowns in the NFL. Tua was number one in yards thrown, passing yards thrown, and Jordan Love was number two in touchdowns in the NFL, and he made it further than any of these quarterbacks in the playoffs last year. Then, where does that leave Trevor Lawrence? Of course, it doesn't really benefit him, all the things that I'm laying out, obviously. It might seem like I'm hating. I'm not trying to do that or trying to say that I hate this deal because it's just the nature of the market, but these are just the facts that the Jacksonville Jaguars had in front of them, and at the same time thought this guy, Trevor Lawrence, the negatives outweighed the positives here, and we almost had to sign him, which I don't think could be the case, honestly. I'm saying it, but at the same time, to rebuttal that stance, if that was how the Jaguars were thinking, you had so much time with Trevor Lawrence. I think that fifth-year option is so vital in this situation because he had one bad year. He had a very good one in his second year. Then this past year, like you see on your screen, not so good. So you're not really too sure, or I at least wouldn't be, to pay him the most amount of money currently in the NFL, along with Joe Burrow. You know what that says to people who don't really watch and who don't really pay attention too much to football, that these two guys are on the same level. And that's not the case, obviously, but that's just how the market boils down to, really at the core of it. And now the Jacksonville Jaguars have to hope that this can work out for them in the future. I'm not saying it's all lost. I'm definitely not. He's only been in the NFL 3 years, and you have seen a glimpse of that potential that he could reach. But again, to make him the highest paid, just based on the facts, I think I would have given it another year. Similar to Brandon Ayuk, where I would want to see one more year out of him to really want to pay him $30+ million per year. I can understand why the 49ers are hesitant. I can see why the Jaguars would have stayed hesitant, but they jumped the gun. They wanted to make sure they potentially didn't have to pay Trevor Lawrence over $55 million per year, which could have been a real possibility if Dak or Tua or Jordan Love got that next contract. Now, they're put in a bad spot, or at least I should say their teams are, because they're the ones that have to give up this money. And all of them could make a very good argument that they are at a better spot in their career currently than what Trevor Lawrence has shown, at least this past year and in his 3 years in the NFL. But, it just makes for a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? It just makes it a lot more entertaining, honestly, because these teams are scrambling now, especially the Cowboys, because they've been on this for a while now. The further they wait, the further and further Dak gets away from them, I believe. Jordan Love and Tua, very similar situations, or Tua similar to Dak, just because the Dolphins are there. They're saying they want to get it done, but there are very much doubts with them. Jordan Love coming off of his first year starting, so can you really base a $50+ million deal off of 1 year? Again, that's just the nature of the market. It might not seem fair, but that's how it is right now, and Trevor Lawrence is just the latest quarterback to benefit off of that. Good for him, honestly. With all the talk about the stats and everything that I just brought up, it's good for him at the end of the day. He got himself a pretty good bag there, so you can't complain if I was him. But hopefully for the Jaguars now, it pays off for them in the years to come. But let me know what you guys think of this. What you guys thought of Trevor Lawrence being the highest paid quarterback, or tied for the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, and who do you think will be next to get a massive contract extension out of those quarterbacks, Tua, Dak, and Jordan Love? With that in mind, we will take a break from the show and head to our first break, and when we return, we're going to talk about Tom Brady and the comments he made on the new wave of quarterbacks coming into the NFL. Pretty interesting what he said, and I'll give my reactions to it and dig a little bit further as to why all these problems are arising with these new quarterbacks. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back in just a few seconds.